Adaptation Fund projects help vulnerable communities around the world adapt and build resilience to the negative impacts of climate change. Because these projects are often the very first concrete adaptation projects implemented, they serve as valuable models that can be scaled up within the country or replicated in regions facing similar climate challenges.
Many of our projects have been scaled up after the initial Adaptation Fund investment, and that's one of the key features of the Adaptation Fund, that they offer something to build on.
To date, 18 successful projects from the Adaptation Fund portfolio have been the basis for transformational change, where these pilot initiatives have been scaled up or replicated. We see examples of scaling up across the fund's portfolio. In Senegal, the Adaptation Fund worked with CSE, Centre de Suivi Écologique, to build resilience against sea rise, protecting people, houses, and economic and cultural infrastructure.
Le projet a été très bénéfique pour le Sénégal. Donc dans ce projet-là, et il était question qu'on arrive à un changement d'échelle.
As an accredited National Implementing Entity, or NIE, Senegal took advantage of the Adaptation Fund's pioneering direct access modality to fund the project that was later scaled up.
The initial funding was about $8.6 million from the Adaptation Fund, and the project was to help the country, Senegal, to deal with coastal erosion, which is one of the biggest issues the country faces in terms of climate change issues. The project has been completed with some hard infrastructure like the seawall and so on. Given the success of the project, the country has approached the Green Climate Fund to expand the solution that have been generated by this project. So the GCF came on board with a new project for about $8 million in addition, to continue the activities that we have implemented.
The Adaptation Fund project in Ethiopia features the implementation of climate-resilient water management methods, climate-smart agriculture techniques, as well as capacity-building measures for Ethiopia's national implementing entity.
እዚህ ፕሮጀክት የምንማረው ይሄ ነው። የአየር ለውጥን ለመቋቋም ተጓዳኝ የተራቀቱ መሬቶችን በደን መሸፈን፣ በተጓዳኝ ደግሞ ኑሮውን የሚያሻሽልበትን ምርጥ ዘር የእንስሳትም የአዝርትም የአትክልትም የሰጠነው እየተለወጠ ያለው ማለት ነው። የጓሮ አትክልቶችን ሊያለማ የሚችልበት በጓሮ የሚተክለውን ደኖችን የከብት መኖችን አቮካዶ፣ ማንጎ፣ ፓፓያ የሰጠነው ጥሩ ምርት እያመረተና ኑሮን ለመለወጥ ጥረት እያደረገን ያለው ፕሮጀክቱ ይሄን ብቻ አይደለም እየሰራ ያለው። ለመስኖ በሁለቱም ቀበሌ ላይ ከ100 ሄክታር በላይ ሊያለማ የሚያስችል ጥናት ተጠንቶ ስራው እየተሰራ ነው።
In Ethiopia, as in every Adaptation Fund project, the benefits to struggling communities go well beyond the improvements to the water supply and farms.
It also creates food for animals, it creates extra income and livelihoods for the people and in temporary employment, as well as that of alternative income, which all really in the end boosts the adaptive capacity of the beneficiary households. It also had a very important local community participation in the planning process, which really increased their sense of ownership. So this project provided a model that was in the end replicated in neighboring states with an extra over $4 million, which was donated by the Italian Development Corporation.
Meanwhile, working with India's NIE, NABARD, the Adaptation Fund piloted a project to help the vulnerable villages in the Andhra Pradesh region protect their livelihoods by protecting their coastal areas.
The project aims to reduce the climate change vulnerability along the Krishna Delta by integrated mangrove fishery farming system where mangroves and aquaculture are integrated, and culturing of sea bass in the floating cages. These adaptation strategies not only reduce the climate change vulnerability but also it enhances the livelihood security of the community.
The project components were strategically planned to ensure that the adaptation strategies are simple and should increase community ownership and enhance the sustainability of the project. There is a large scope of expansion of these activities along the coastal area of Andhra Pradesh and also in other coastal areas of the country.
The best way to scale a project is to plan for it. You know, at the very beginning, during project design, even at the very early stage of project reviews, when the project comes to us, one of the things we ask countries is how this project can be sustained and how this project can be scaled up in case there is a possibility. So it's important to think about scalability at the very early stage.
The local stakeholders that originally implemented these projects in partnership with the Adaptation Fund were able to show other funders that their projects were worthy of implementing on a larger scale, but also that they had developed the institutional capacity and technical skills to successfully manage them. The fund instituted a new scale-up grants window to help implementing partners whose projects are near completion to prepare the needed steps to receive funding from other sources by developing expanded proposals based on the experience of designing and implementing a successful Adaptation Fund project.
The project in Rwanda, we had initial funding with the Adaptation Fund, and the project is a great example. It shows how the scaling up grant is important, because sometimes we have a nice project on the ground delivering concrete results, but from this project to the next step, there is a gap here. And without this kind of funding, there is no possibility for the countries to bridge this gap and to make sure that the project moves to a next step.
With over 130 concrete projects in nearly 100 countries, the Adaptation Fund has carefully amassed an enormous amount of valuable information and experience, which it shares among its implementing partners and with other organizations addressing climate change adaptation.
The knowledge management that we do at the fund by creating that knowledge base and sharing it with interested countries and other stakeholders around the world is crucial to providing the base for scalability and also replicability of successful interventions. And we really see it as our duty to gather and share this knowledge with interested parties around the world. So the larger adaptation investments done, let's say, by other funds or other institutions depend not only on the available finance out there, but really also on having access to practical experiences of implementing adaptation from preceding or smaller scale projects that have been funded by pioneering funds such as ours. That is really our niche. And conversely, for the Adaptation Fund, it is possible to increase the broader impact of our projects when those projects serve as a foundation for future and larger investments.
We have a wealth of experience of what works and what doesn't work. And in many cases, we can build on the existing projects and scale them up. And that's what we've been doing through our scale-up grants that we launched a couple of years ago. And there seems to be a lot of interest in those grants in a way that those countries can meet their adaptation finance needs by looking at the broader scope of potential funders out there.
The Adaptation Fund works with other partners to address adaptation issues, and we have other sister organizations like the climate funds, and we constantly engage with them on portfolio monitoring issues. And one of the things which we do recently is to talk with them to see how we can complement each other. Let me give an example with our colleagues from the Green Climate Fund. We have come up with a scaling up framework, which is still internal, but the idea is to see at any point during the project implementation, but usually it's after the project reach a midterm evaluation, to see what type of projects and activities can be scaled up with additional funding, either from the GCF with initial funding from the AF, or the other way around. For example, if the GCF has a project that has been delivering concrete results on the ground, maybe the Adaptation Fund can scale up this project.
Out of the almost 20 Adaptation Fund projects successfully scaled up or replicated so far, 7 of them have been financed by the Green Climate Fund, a leading international finance institution. In Senegal, to adapt to coastal erosion. In the Maldives, to protect scarce water resources. In Pakistan, to reduce risks from glacial flooding. In Colombia, to scale up resilient water management practices. In Georgia, to enhance early warning systems. In India, to adapt to sea level rise. And in Rwanda, to increase the resiliency of rural communities to climate change. The Adaptation Fund has also seen other funds or banks scale up its projects. In other cases, funders exhibit synergy with Adaptation Fund projects on the ground.
We have good examples with the GEF. We always seek for partnership to maximize our impact.
The Adaptation Fund's focus on local ownership of projects, institutional capacity building, and knowledge sharing among its grantees represents an enormous opportunity for other, larger climate finance institutions to identify and underwrite proven adaptation measures that can effectively and efficiently help the increasing numbers of poor and vulnerable communities confronted by a need to adapt in the face of dangerous new climate impacts. To further assist climate adaptation funders and the wider public, the Adaptation Fund is preparing a study that will examine the role of scalability within the context of the projects that it funds.
We're at the point of collecting evidence from the implementing entities, conducting interviews, but hopefully some key lessons and best practices in various sectors will be identified. And to just give one example that will be included as a case study is a project that we've had in Chile, in the O'Higgins region, titled Enhancing Resilience to Climate Change of the Small Agriculture, implementing the capacity building and training system, but also to implement measures and technologies for increasing water resources, since it's a very dry area. So this project was scaled up with funds from the Green Climate Fund. We are in the process of gathering the evidence from them, but also from the country to see what were really the incentives at the country level to allow it to be scaled up. Were there any barriers? What were really the success factors and the sustainability that it will lead to once being scaled up?
The various ways to scale up projects create more opportunities to sustain and expand the innovative activities that are piloted through the Adaptation Fund.
El Fondo de Adaptación fue clave en la promoción de medidas de adaptación para temas pesqueros. Lo hacen de manera sostenible y de esa manera son un ejemplo a replicar en otras zonas del ámbito costero.